8 o'clock-ish Thursday morning. I think it was 8, maybe like 8:30. I don't know. I got up, I went to the airport. I had a long day of flying ahead of me. Spent like 4 hours in another airport. But finally, after a couple of flights, I made it to New Orleans. And got myself checked in for NAIC. They actually were doing badge pickup at the airport, in the baggage claim area, as well as at the venue, which I'd never seen before at a tournament. And the desk at the airport was open until 8 p.m. and I was scheduled to arrive at about 6:30, but my flights were delayed a bit. I was starting to think it might not happen. I also was sitting near the back of the plane, which is a little unfortunate, but I zoomed out of there once the plane landed. I got my badge 4 minutes before the desk closed. Got my bag. Last year when I went to NAIC, Air Canada lost my bag temporarily, and I had to make an emergency Walmart run to get some clothes. But no such mishap this time. Got my bag, got my badge, stepped out into the humid New Orleans air for the very first time. The humidity really just kind of smacked me in the face right away. My Uber driver warned me that it could sneak up on me, but I did not find it sneaky at all, coming from Canada. But I was on my way to NAIC 2024. Checked into the hotel. And the next morning, it all started. So we're going to do a quick little recap here. This is my first time doing a tournament recap. It's not actually my first time attempting one. I started to record a recap of the Toronto Regional back in the fall, which was my previous tournament before NAIC. But I bailed on that midway through recording, and there were kind of two reasons, or I should say two major problems with the idea that I had there. One was that I don't really even remember what kind of visual component I had in mind for it. There probably wasn't much. And the other issue was that I just didn't remember that much of what had happened at the tournament. I find that when I play a bunch of rounds in a day, and this is not only a VGC thing, this has happened to me in other competitions as well, the details of what's happened tend to get memory hold very quickly. And every time I've gone to a VGC tournament so far, which is 4 times, including this past weekend, I have always thought about taking a moment after each round just to take down some notes about what happened so I can refer to them later. But I never actually followed through on doing that until now. I have some notes for this tournament. They're not necessarily very good. I think they get better over time as I go into later rounds of the tournament, until the last couple rounds late in the day when I got tired and my notes got bad again. But we'll make do with what we have. And as for visuals, I of course was able to take advantage of the sheer amount of data that comes out now. We get so much information about everyone who's at a tournament and what they use, readily available on sites like LabMouse. And so I was able to grab all of my opponents' open team sheets. No need to try to memorize what they had, which is good because some of my notes just have question marks for some of the Pokemon that I faced. But it's all available online. We can look at their open team sheets together. I have marked how each round went, game by game. And yeah, that's it. I've redone the pastes, though. I've taken my opponents' names out of the pastes. I don't know that there's really any need to do that, but I didn't play anyone at NAIC that I recognized as a really well-known player, so I just felt a little weird about putting their names out there. In any case, I've started off with my team on the screen. If you watched my last video, you've seen it before, or if you watched the LA Regional, you've seen its creator use it, because it's an exact copy of the team that got 11th place at that tournament, with a core of a hyper-offensive core of course, Regidrago. I just minimized the window, don't know what that's going to look like. Regidrago, Chi-Yu, Zacian, and Whimsicott, with Amoonguss patching up the Trick Room matchup, and Ogerpon, Wellspring Mask form, patching up some other matchups like Rain, like Fire types in general, and maybe some other stuff that we'll see as we go through the tournament. So, got to the venue. Wasn't late this time. I barely made it in time last year. Mostly just because of the line to get in. But nope, got seated at the table, no problem, and they started to make the announcement. Video Game Masters, you may... Oh wait, hold on, not yet. I thought, oh, they look like they're still giving out team sheets. That may be why they didn't say to begin yet. And then I realized that there was a marching band walking through the venue. Welcome to New Orleans, I guess. It was, I mean, still within my first 24 hours in the city. I'd just eaten at the hotel bar the night before. I hadn't experienced much of it yet. But yeah, they had a band going through. I probably have put a video that I took from the table at the front of this. And we got to watch and listen to that before it finally was indeed time to get going on tournament. My opponent in round 1 was, I think, one of my more memorable opponents. He was a very enthusiastic guy. He said he was playing his second tournament, and he just was like very eager, really great energy all around. I ran into him a few times throughout the day and kind of caught up on how the tournament was going for both of us, but this guy offered me, I'm not kidding, I'm pretty sure he offered me 10 fist bumps before we even started playing game 1. And it wasn't just me, he was fist bumping everyone. People at the other tables, he even fist bumped the judge at one point, I'm pretty sure. When I ran into him later in the day, we could do just like a quick, hey, how'd your round go? And he'd managed to fit 3 fist bumps into there. So really nice guy. Like I said, definitely a memorable opponent. And he had a memorable team too. He told me that it being his second tournament, instead of trying to be, to really master one of the most broken restricted Pokemon better than anyone else there, he was instead going to try to be the best Zekrom player at the tournament. I don't think he pulled that off, by the way. I think there was a Zekrom player who did better, but this guy went 4-5, so for such an off-meta team with so many weird techs on it, that is pretty good. I give him props for that, for sure. And as you can see here, maybe I shouldn't have spoiled the game results like this, but he actually took game 1 off me. And the reason is pretty straightforward. My team is built in a Trick Room matchup like this. You can see he has the Sinistcha with Trick Room, and then the Iron Defense Body Press Avalugg. My team is built to try to overwhelm this kind of thing with powerful offense from Regidrago and Chi-Yu, mainly. Well, I brought that mode game 1, and my opponent had Misty Terrain Grimmsnarl, Assault Vest Incineroar, Wide Guard Avalugg, and then the Sinistcha could set Trick Room for him and give him the speed advantage. And he brought those 4 Pokemon to every game. I never saw the Volcarona, and he never brought the Zekrom. So I say I faced Zekrom in round 1, but he actually never brought his restricted Pokemon to any of our games. But yeah, he got me with this stuff in game 1. I just couldn't break through with the pieces that I brought. You can see the Incineroar has Snarl as well. The Sinistcha, I don't know, it was bulky. But when you lose to some weird off-meta stuff like that, sometimes you have to find a weird mode to deal with it. And I did. So in game 2, I led Zacian and Ogerpon. I figured those two gave me pretty good offensive coverage into whatever my opponent wanted. So I could Terra Ground Zacian against Zekrom. I could just try to hit Avalugg hard with especially super effective Behemoth Blade. I could try to bully the Grimmsnarl with Zacian. That's definitely something I was thinking about. And then Ogerpon could cover the fire types. It just felt like a stronger offensive lead, given that my opponent had so many ways to mitigate special attackers, and Dragon-type special attackers in particular with the Misty Terrain. And then I brought Amoonguss and Regidrago in the back. And what happened was my opponent got in... I don't remember if he led with them, but he got in... Actually, I don't think he did. I think I tried to get rid of the Incineroar quickly, but he got in his Sinistcha next to his Avalugg and set Trick Room. But that gave up a lot of offensive pressure on his end. The Avalugg could only attack with Body Press. Mirror Coat technically is an attack, but only works in very specific conditions. And the Sinistcha could only attack with Strength Sap. So I had pretty much, against those two, a free switch into my Amoonguss. And I could get Regidrago in pretty safely too. I did think carefully about which slot to switch it into, because I didn't want it to take a Body Press. But once I got those two Pokemon in very safely, then you can see my opponent doesn't have safety goggles on anything. Not on the Incineroar, not on any of his Pokemon. He doesn't have any Grass type before Terra except the Sinistcha, and I think he might even have Terastallized the Sinistcha, and he hadn't set up Misty Terrain. So once I got Amoonguss in Trick Room, it could shut down almost any one of his Pokemon with Spore. That just was a massive threat to his whole team. And then Regidrago, once it went Terra Ghost, the Avalugg couldn't hit it with Body Press, and it could, my opponent was very good at stopping dragon attacks, but Regidrago could punch holes with Terra Blast. And so that was what I did to turn things around on him in game 2, and then later I got Ogre Pawn back in and Ivy cudgeled through what was left of his team. And that was so effective that I thought in... Oh, I also have in my notes that in game 2, at some point Amoonguss survived a hit at 1 HP, and then ate its Citrus Berry, and then on the next turn survived another hit at 1 HP. So that was pretty cool. I can't remember what the context was, maybe something with the Incineroar. But anyway, that was so effective at turning his Trick Room mode around on him that I thought he might bring something different in game 3, and I thought about whether I had another lead I should try. But I felt like the mode that I had brought pretty well covered his options. I already walked through why I liked the Zacian Ogre Pawn lead, and then Amoonguss was good insurance if he did bring the Trick Room again. And Regidrago couldn't just pop off with Dragon Energy in this set, but it had been very strong with Terra Blast in the previous game. I didn't like Chiyu that much into the Wide Guard, Mirror Coat, Assault Vest, Trick Room stuff. So I felt comfortable bringing the same mode, and my opponent actually did just bring the Trick Room stuff again, and I turned it around on him again. So lost game 1, but won games 2 and 3, and started the tournament 1-0. You always love to do that. And carried some nice momentum into round 2 against this Miraidon team here. Oh, the Miraidon is all the way at the bottom. But you can see there, it's an Assault Vest Miraidon. He had Choice Band, Single Striker Shifu, Meteor Beam Iron Moth, this bulky, annoying Wo-Chien, Intimidate Therian, well, it always has Intimidate, Scarf Therian Landorus. And according to the usage stats that I saw, the only Alolan Raichu in the entire tournament. So that's very cool. You love to see a cool off-meta Pokemon like that show up. But my opponent's team did have... I can see as I go through my notes that I really didn't write down much for this set, because my opponent's team had some pretty obvious vulnerabilities. Raichu, Iron Moth, and Miraidon are all pretty much just food for Terra Ground Zacian, and... that was it. That pretty much summarizes game 1 right there. He brought all 3 of those Pokemon to game 1. I didn't write down what the other Pokemon he brought was, but I led Zacian Whimsicott with Chiyu and Regidrago in the back, and Terra Ground Zacian just fed on this team in game 1. And in game 2, he put up a little bit more resistance. I think he might have brought the Urshifu, but terastallized it, which was actually beneficial to me because I felt more comfortable going for a Dark Pulse into it as a poison type than as a fighting and dark type. Maybe I'm mixing up my rounds here because I don't actually have that written down. But the bigger thing was he brought the Wo-Chien in game 2, and that did slow down the game. My special attackers had to watch out for Snarl, and of course my Zacian was slowed down by Tablets of Ruin. I think he terastallized the Wo-Chien as well, so it resisted Behemoth Blade and like Heat Wave and Overheat, but it kind of ran into what Wolf Glick calls all my friends are dead syndrome. I gradually broke through the rest of his team and brought him down to just the Wo-Chien, and then it couldn't win by itself. So it did slow the game down, but it didn't change the outcome in the end. And I got to 2-0, which I think was my first time starting a tournament with 2 wins. So we definitely take those. And at that point, both my opponent and I were selected for Team Check. So I'd never been Team Checked at a major tournament before. I played the Mid-Season Showdown in Toronto, and I was Team Checked there very late. So I knew the process a little bit. But yeah, I just gave my Switch and my team sheet to a judge, and they told me where to go to pick it up. Went and hung around there later, got my team back, no issues. I actually was... I mean, I knew that I hadn't genned my Pokemon or anything, so I wasn't very worried, but sometimes weird glitches have popped up lately where, like, if you breed your Pokemon a certain way, it can be falsely flagged as hacked. I can't remember exactly what it is now. I think Gold Bottle Caps had an issue, but I hadn't used any of those, so I wasn't worried about that. But I did actually send a few of my Pokemon. I sent all possible Pokemon, so Zacian, Regidrago, Whimsicott, and Amoonguss back to Shield, and Eevee trained them there because I just had more resources. I just, like... I was a little low on stuff like money and some other supplies in Violet, and I knew in Shield I had the money to just buy vitamins for these guys, so I just did my Eevee training that way. And there was a part of me that was worried that there'd be some weird glitch with that, but nope, Team Check was fine, and we moved on to round 3, bringing lots of momentum. into a 2-game loss to a Zamazenta team. Body press iron defense set. I remember feeling good when I didn't see wide guard on the Zamazenta, but I guess that didn't help me. You see the Chen Pao, Ditto, Rillaboom with the Assault Vest. I don't remember what stat this Flutter Mane boosted, but and they got the Galarian Moltres as well. This was my only opponent to make day 2, so... And I don't think he even did too badly there, so... Hey, sometimes you just run into a better player. Although there was a little bit of drama in this one. My opponent got pretty visibly frustrated because on game 1, turn 1, my Chi-Yu burned something. I didn't write down what it burned. I think it might have been the Zamazenta even. But it definitely burned something with Heat Wave, turn 1. And my opponent very noticeably reacted. He was like, ah, I can't remember if he said any words, but he was upset. But he won the game and the set, so he probably wasn't upset for long. I have in my notes that the Sash Chen Pao was a problem, and that the Terra Water Zamazenta took hits well. I practiced with Zamazenta some before I tried the team that I ended up using. I never found a Zamazenta team that I really liked, but at first I expected to, so I tried a bunch of them. And I always felt like Water was a really, at face value, a really obviously good Terra type for Zamazenta. Of course, changing the Fire weakness into a resistance, being a solid defensive type all around, Terra Water was kind of my go-to on Zamazenta, and I was surprised when Terra Grass won Stockholm and showed up a bunch in the meta around that time. Even though Grass is obviously a very good Terra type, Spore immunity, Rage Powder immunity, does decent things to some of Zamazenta's type matchups. I felt like Water was better, and I don't know that I'm vindicated. I mean, Grass I think has still had more tournament success. But yeah, my opponent brought Terra Water Zamazenta to this set, and it was a very real problem. He could terrestrialize pretty effectively around my Chi-Yu's Overheat or Heat Wave. And I couldn't just delete it like I've sometimes been able to do with Grass Zamazenta on the ladder and whatnot. So yeah, I think I did burn Zamazenta, but it just took hits so well and wore my team down with Chen Pao. And with the Focus Sash and Protect, Chen Pao, he preserved it very well, and I just couldn't get rid of it quickly enough. You know, he just outlasted the Hyper Offense such that he was able to find openings to exploit. I have written down some details about the specific games, actually. Oh, his fighting coverage was a problem, too. Why was it? Okay. Game 1, he got his Ditto transformed into my Zacian, and I terrestrialized Zacian and got rid of Ditto with Terra Blast, but he then knocked out my Zacian, I think with Icicle Crash from Chen Pao. So I traded my Zacian and my Terra for the Ditto. Not great value for me. And he brought it down to an endgame where I just had Regidrago against his Flutter Mane. And of course, the Regidrago set that I was using, it was my team over here, can't touch Flutter Mane unless it's terrestrialized. I had already used my Terra, and I had Dragon Attack, Normal Attack. So yeah, he saved his Flutter Mane for the endgame. It's coming back to me as I read it in my notes. He saved Flutter Mane for the endgame. I traded my Terra for Ditto, not ideal, and there was just nothing my Regidrago could do. So that was really, my opponent manipulated the matchup really well there. And then in game 2, I did manage to terrestrialize my Regidrago and get rid of the Flutter Mane that way. But I think he knocked my Regidrago out soon after. It doesn't say what with, but I think it might have been Sucker Punch from Chen Pao. Again, Chen Pao with the Sash was just so hard for me to remove quickly. And a massive offensive threat into especially Regidrago, but Pokemon like Whimsicott as well. And he brought it down to an end game where I was relying on Chi-Yu, but he had fighting coverage on both the Zamazenta and the Chen Pao, and there just wasn't an out for Chi-Yu to bring the game back. I wrote down in my notes that maybe I could have used redirection in this matchup, but I don't remember it well enough to figure out what that would have done for me. I feel like Ogerpon could have been decent into some of these Pokemon, but yeah, the Zamazenta was too bulky, and the Chen Pao was too hard to get rid of, and the Ditto turning into Zacian was a massive threat, and well played by my opponent. Like I said, he made day 2. Good for him. So the only thing to do then is to bounce back in round 4, right? 2-1, no big deal. Just get another win under our belt. Oh, I also lost round 4. Also in 2 games. Dropped to 2-2. This was another Miraidon matchup. This one, of course, you can see has specs. And like a lot of specs Miraidon, it only had electric and dragon attacks. We'll touch on that in a second. And actually, this is basically the Rajan... Well, no. You can see traces of the Rajan Ball team, but this one has Chi-Yu as the other special attacker. Terra Ground, Terra Blast, which wasn't a set that I was familiar with, but I saw a couple of times at NAIC. So it must have emerged in the meta fairly recently, and I must have just missed that development. And then he had the Screamtail, which is a really frustrating Pokemon to play against, with the combination of Encore and Disable. I played... Last year's NAIC was when Mouse Ape teams with Screamtail were having a moment, and I played 2 of those last year and lost to both. So I'm familiar with being frustrated by Screamtail. But in any case... Okay, game 1, he put me on the back foot, leading Whimsicott and Chi-Yu, right? Massive offensive pressure right off the bat, and I was trying to kind of switch around and cover it because I was started off in a bad position into his hyper offense. And I wrote down that I pivoted too much and I probably should have played it more aggressively. I believe that, but I don't have the context in my notes as to why that was. And then, oh yeah, the Whimsicott was locking my... The Whimsicott's Encore was a massive threat to my team. I couldn't protect very effectively around his Pokemon because he had 2 Pokemon with Encore, and the Whimsicott in particular caused me a lot of trouble. Another Focus Sash user that's hard to get rid of quickly with my Hyper Offense when I'm on the back foot and I can't really get into position to get off a lot of attacks. And then I got to an end game. I wrote down that it was a Zacian versus Miraidon end game. My opponent, I think, still had the Whimsicott as well, and I might have had some other Pokemon, but I lost my Zacian to a Draco Meteor, so I terastallized it to try to deal with the Miraidon, hoping that he would lock into an electric attack, but he locked into Draco Meteor, he got rid of my Zacian, and I lost game 1. And then I realized immediately that I could have protected Zacian, seen what the Miraidon would lock into, and then decide whether or not to use my Terra based on whether it gave me an immunity. Now, I don't know whether there was a win con that came from that, because I'm pretty sure he had the Whimsicott still on the field, so it could have locked my Zacian into Protect, and then chipped away at it with Moonblast forever. Maybe I still lose that. In the heat of the moment, immediately after Game 1, going into Game 2, I wasn't going to think that all the way through. What's important is I felt like I had missed a possible win con that was pretty straightforward and I should have seen, and I realized it right after the game ended. And because of that, I went into Game 2 feeling noticeably kind of tilted. And what happened in Game 2? Okay, I decided to play into the mirror. I led my own Whimsicott and Chi-Yu against his Whimsicott and Chi-Yu, and just, like, hoped that the speed ties and whatnot worked out. But that might not have been the play, and like I said, I was feeling kind of tilted. And my Chi-Yu, of course, had, it was Terra Ghost with Heat Wave, Overheat, Dark Pulse, and Snarl. My opponent's Chi-Yu was Terra Ground with Terra Blast, and so he used that on my Chi-Yu, and I didn't have much for it in that lead position. I think it was a 2-hit KO. Yeah. It was a 2-hit KO, and he won the speed tie on turn 2. I don't know what happened with the turn 1 speed tie, but it doesn't matter. His Chi-Yu got rid of mine before mine could get rid of it. And I wasn't able to get a Heat Wave into his Whimsicott and break its Sash, so with the Sash intact, it still was a nightmare with Encore for the rest of the game. I got my Zacian in, but he did lock my Zacian into Protect, and just wore it down over the following turns with Whimsicott, Moonblast, and Ogerpon, Ivy Cudgel. I don't really have more details than that in my notes. The last line of my notes just says, oof. But like I said, I was feeling tilted in Game 2, so yeah, I don't think I was thinking turns through the best even in the moment, much less in my notes afterward. I just lost 2 straight sets, both of them in 2 games, and I felt like I had kind of thrown at least Game 1 of Round 4. And yeah, I wasn't feeling very good. And I stepped out of the convention hall for the first time since I had gotten there that morning, and just tried to kind of clear my head by walking around the convention center a bit. I didn't even go outside, partly because it wasn't like super clear to me which doors I could and couldn't use. And partly because it was so hot outside, and I'm not really built for that weather. I didn't really feel like that would make me feel better, necessarily. But I walked around the convention center a little more, tried to get my head on straight, and I kind of got mixed results at first in round 5. You can see I lost game 1 into this Ice Rider team with pretty standard stuff. Pelipper, Rapid Striker, Shifu, Amoonguss to go nuts in Trick Room, and then Incineroar and Tinglu supporting them. Oh, AV Tinglu, no less. There was something about this matchup. I guess I was I was probably still a little tilted after round 4, but there was something about this matchup that I think I was badly overthinking as well. So let me see if I have that in my notes. I do have that every game they brought Ice Rider, Tinglu, Incineroar, and Amoonguss, so they never brought Pelipper or Urshifu. Probably helped me that they never brought the Wide Guard Pelipper. Okay, I didn't bring Regidrago to game 1. I brought both Ogerpon and Amoonguss. Why did I do that? Amoonguss is pretty obvious because I'm playing a Trick Room team. It's basically standard. In one of the standard modes of my team that you bring Amoonguss against Trick Room to try to take advantage of the opponent's Trick Room and prevent them from sweeping you. Why I brought Ogerpon instead of Regidrago, I'm sure it was to help into the Tinglu. Probably the Urshifu as well. Yeah, I think I was afraid of those two Pokemon. But it meant that I kind of threw my team's standard modes out and brought my 2 most situational Pokemon at the same time, which certainly can work. It worked in round 1. But here it was kind of messy. And I felt like I had kind of Galaxy Brained it in a bad way afterward. And then with the Terra Water again, Terra Water a problem on the Calyrex, facing probably my Chi-Yu, although I didn't write down what my lead was. They got their Trick Room up. I terrestrialized my Ogerpon to try to get some offense going without Regidrago, but of course that meant that it was no longer immune to Spore. So they were able to just put my Ogerpon to sleep. No longer immune to Rage Powder either. And the last thing I wrote about game 1 was just the word bad. I was still feeling bad at this point, I guess. And then I kind of had a turning point in the tournament. I was like, wait, hold on. I just Galaxy Brained the hell out of that. I know what my... I know my basic lines into this Trick Room matchup. I actually feel like it's one of the better matchups for my team. Maybe I'm thrown a little bit by the Tinglu and by the Urshifu. But I've gotten, at this point, way too far away from my team's simple game plans that I've practiced and I know. So what I need to do here is try to get back to that. And in game 2, I led Chi-Yu, Regidrago, as I typically do, into Ice Rider Trick Room with that team. Got back to basics. And I'll tell you exactly what I wrote about what happened in this game. Ghost Drago avoided Fake Out, easy sweep. So there we go. Terra Ghost Regidrago on the Incineroar, and just ran through their team. And then in game 3, of course, they found some adjustments for that. They brought Tinglu, and I'm pretty sure they terrestrialized it, so Regidrago no longer good into this. Not really ever good into this, but especially when it's a fairy type. But my own Terra Ghost Chi-Yu survived a Stomping Tantrum, so that helped me get some attacks off against the Tinglu. And it meant that they didn't lead Incineroar, so they didn't have Fake Out pressure right off the bat. And that meant that with the Ghost Chi-Yu surviving a Stomping Tantrum, I guess they led Tinglu Calyrex, I'm inferring from what I've written down here. Terra Ghost Chi-Yu survived a Stomping Tantrum, there was no Fake Out to worry about, so I was able to double target the Calyrex. And they switched it out, but that still denies Trick Room, right? Pressuring the Calyrex out still means they don't get Trick Room up. And then in the late game, once Chi-Yu and Regidrago had done their thing, they couldn't just sweep through the team like last time. But in the late game, I got Zacian in next to my Ogerpon, and Zacian just kind of cleaned up. Obviously, it could knock out the Fairy Tinglu pretty easily, knocked out some other stuff as well, and it had Follow Me support from my Ogerpon. So, not quite the easy sweep as the previous game, but still a pretty straightforward game plan that worked, and I felt like I was remembering how to use my team correctly again. I think I really did overcome some tilt there. I don't know how badly I was ever tilting, but I way overthought game 1, and then I got back to basics, and I turned it around. And that put me in a much better position going into round 6, where I faced Eternatus. I already had one restricted Pokemon. I mean, I kind of expected the unexpected at this tournament. I figured that I'd probably have a round or two where I saw some off-meta restricted Pokemon. Didn't really have specific expectations about which one. But I already gotten Zekrom. And here I got, round 6, here I got Eternatus. But it was not the scariest of Eternatus sets. Actually, I was sort of like mock nervous going into this one because I sat down across from my opponent And I think I have the right guy here. I think this was the opponent who had a big Tinkaton plush with a giant hammer. I mean, you know what Tinkaton looks like. The plush had a huge hammer, and I was like, oh no, I'm in danger. And then somebody walked by. I think they might have been a judge. Probably not a judge, but somebody walked by and they were like, you got this, to my opponent. I guess it was someone from his local circuit back home. And I was like, uh-oh, I'm not the crowd favorite here either. I'm in danger. Anyway, but it was Meteor Beam Eternatus with notably not Flamethrower, but rather Sludge Wave, Dynamax Cannon. Oh yeah, he was hitting his own Pokemon with Sludge Wave too. Or he had to commit the Wide Guard with Pelipper to protect his Pokemon from the Sludge Wave. Not having Flamethrower was a problem for him, and the Sludge Wave is kind of a problem as well, and I don't really get what the Terra Normal was about. Probably to take Astral Barrage or something, but it's a bit of a weird Eternatus set, I think. I don't know, I haven't used Eternatus. But he's got the Pelipper with it, the Trick Room, Chandelure, which is pretty cool, King Gambit, AV Archaludon, but, well, I was going to say not as scary outside of rain, but he has the Pelipper, he can bring rain with it. I don't know if he did. And then the Grassy Seed Rillaboom here. Sometimes I wrote down what my opponents brought to the games. But not so much this set. Okay. Game 1, I led Chi-Yu and Regidrago against Eternatus and Chandelure. So that's, on paper, a big advantage for me. Scarf Chi-Yu is the fastest Pokemon there. And I was able to deny Trick Room by just Dark Pulsing the Chandelure. I don't even know if he went for Trick Room. Chandelure just dropped to a Dark Pulse. Pretty straightforward. But then there was a bit of a twist that I did... Well, maybe I should have seen it coming, but I honestly didn't even think about it. His Eternatus, I think I didn't think about it because it looked like he'd brought Trick Room, so I thought, okay, Eternatus is probably slow. Well, it was faster than my Regidrago, and a one-shot Regidrago before that could get an attack off. So I denied a possible Trick Room, but I don't even know if he went for that, because he had the faster attacker of the two Dragon types. But with the Eternatus not having Flamethrower, I was able to just bring Zacian in and clean up pretty much. The Rillaboom also didn't have high horsepower, as you can see here. So he didn't really have an effective offensive threat into Zacian once I got it in. And although he tried to fake out Chi-Yu with the Rillaboom, I just got around that with Terra Ghost. So overcame that pretty easily once the Chandelure was down. Game 2, I literally wrote down that I tried something weird. I led Ogerpon and Regidrago, and he led King Gambit and Pelipper. I think it was King Gambit. And Pelipper. And I terrestrialized my Ogerpon and just got rid of the King Gambit, taking advantage of my opponent's rain. He confused my Regidrago with Hurricane, and I believe it did hurt itself once. And he got Tailwind up, but I was able to stall the Tailwind out. And then once the Tailwind was stalled out, he got his Chandelure in and he terrestrialized it. And I thought that he had a win con there with Trick Room, because I did go for another Dark Pulse into the Chandelure, but this time he terrestrialized and it took the Dark Pulse. But no big deal, my Ogerpon just crit it with Ivy Cudgel. And the Grass-type Chandelure went down. I mean, Ivy Cudgel has a boosted crit rate. It's not even that hacksy, but definitely lucky me there. And I got him down to just Eternatus. I had my Zacian in the back, and he forfeited. So, after back-to-back rounds of loss, after... yeah, 5 straight game losses. I now have 4 straight game wins, and I'm 4-2 heading into round 7. And my goal up to this point, this is my 4th major tournament. I've been to 2 regionals, and now this is my 2nd NAIC. Never gone positive before. My goal, my very first event was to go positive. Didn't do it then, haven't done it since. At 4-2, I have, 4 rounds left, and I just need 1 more win to go positive. And so I sit down for round 7, and somebody comes to my table and kind of starts chatting with me. I notice his name on his badge, and I realize this is not my opponent. It's a different name. And I tell him that, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm at the wrong table. Whoops, thanks for letting me know. And he goes. But still no sign of my opponent. I keep waiting. Everybody else shows up. People kind of get started on their sets. No sign of my opponent. Where is he? And then he arrives, only a little bit late. just slightly late, accompanied by a judge. And the judge tells me right off the bat that my opponent is starting the set with a game loss. And then leaves. And I kind of felt... I obviously wanted to be nosy about what had happened there, but I kind of felt awkward. So I think the exact thing that I said to my opponent was, up to you whether you want to tell me what happened, but I'm curious. And he just said that he'd had a team sheet error. And when he handed me his team sheet, it was laid out differently from the others I'd seen that day. I think it probably was freshly printed. I never found out what the error was. Certainly I wasn't affected by it because I didn't see it. It was already resolved by the time he got to the table. I feel like they must have team checked him and caught the error that way. And I don't necessarily know why that's a game loss. Unless it's just punitive. I mean, I'm okay with it if it is, because a team sheet error is the player's fault. They're fairly common, so I'm not saying that like it's a great failing of a player to have a team sheet error. I've never yet had one, because I obsessively check over what I'm doing when I submit. But maybe it could happen someday. It's happened to a lot of people at some point. But it is the player's fault, and when they gave out the sheets at the beginning of the day, you could say, oh, maybe there's something wrong on their end, maybe you submit the correct information, but somehow they print something wrong. But they told us when they gave out the sheets to check our sheets to make sure that everything was correct. So even in that case, they've covered themselves. Team sheet error is the player's fault, but I don't really know why he took a game loss there. I'm okay with it. I'm also okay with it because I was competing directly against him, so it's an advantage for me. If it was because he was late, I mean, he was only a tiny bit late. I don't really think that's necessary. But in any case, I just had to win 1 out of 2 games, and I did that. So we actually look at the round 7 matchup now. You know that one of these W's is a game lost because of a team sheet error. Don't know what the error was. But it's another Ice Rider Calyrex team. So a matchup I feel very good about. And this one's pretty straightforward. Core, Incineroar, Amoonguss, Raging Bolt. I mean, nothing you haven't seen before here. And this one is a Terra Grass Ice Rider, which I'm less afraid of than a Terra Water one, I think. And he brought Ice Rider, Pelipper, Incineroar, and Amoonguss. And he led Ice Rider Amoonguss. I led Chi-Yu Regidrago, as usual, into these matchups to try to overpower them and deny the Trick Room. He used his Terra on the Amoonguss instead of the Calyrex, so the Amoonguss turned into a Water type, and it tanked a Heat Wave very well, but it didn't tank a Dragon Energy. Amoonguss just dropped turn 1. He protected the Calyrex, so I didn't knock that out turn 1, but then he switched it out. So again, offensive pressure with Chi-Yu and Regidrago denies Trick Room. He got the Pelipper in, and he got the Pelipper in, but he never clicked Wide Guard a single time. I don't remember how many turns it was Chi-Yu and Pelipper on the field, but I think it was a few turns. Never once clicked Wide Guard, so I just kept Chi-Yu in and kept clicking Scarf Heat Wave, and it was in rain, so nerfed a bit, but it still chipped things for the rest of the game. And it also got a burn on Pelipper, which isn't as bad as a burn on a Zamazenta, but he just let me get that Heat Wave chip the whole game. Never clicked Wide Guard. And he did eventually knock out my Regidrago, but I just got Zacian in and cleaned up, and I didn't even use my Terra. And that was the only game of that set. My opponent seemed frustrated. I can't really blame him. Like I said, I don't really know that it was necessary that he get a game loss there. I'm not really sure why that had to be the ruling. Not that I necessarily disagree with it. But of course at 4-2, that was his 3rd loss. That was how he got knocked out of contention to win the whole tournament. I'd be frustrated too. But I felt very good on my side because, like I said, my goal had been to go positive. My goal at every tournament I'd been to go positive. I'd never done it before. And now at 5-2, I'd done it with 2 rounds to spare. I feel like I counted something wrong earlier. I guess if I was 4-2 after round 6, I had 3 chances left, and then I did it on the first one. So I'd already locked in my goal with 2 rounds to spare. And I was hyping myself up. I forgot to mention earlier, I think it was after round 5, when I got back, when I broke my 2-set losing streak and got back in the winners column. I was like, all right, we got this. Just got to keep going. Just 4 more rounds to win. Then I was like, wait, hold on. I've mixed up my words here. What I mean is 4 more rounds to play. No, you know what? No. You know what? Let's just say it. 4 more rounds to win. I don't know. Let's just simply win the next 4 rounds. Halfway there. So far, so good. 5-2. Just 2 more rounds to win. I was starting to feel like I might make day 2. I was starting to, I was starting to believe. I didn't really come in thinking there was any serious chance I make day 2, but I was like, maybe it's going to happen. I'm 5-2. I just have 2 more rounds to win. And I was telling myself over and over between rounds. It was like, it's like a mantra I was repeating to myself. I was like, slow down. Take your time. Because I play too quickly sometimes. And I felt like that was how I'd missed some win cons in the 2 rounds I'd lost up to that point. Like, take your time. Impose your game plan. Because I felt like I'd lost game 1. I said that I overthought game 1 in round 5, but I also was playing too reactively. And I felt like I'd played too reactively in this round as well. And that was part of how I'd gotten on the back foot here. I was like, I'm playing hyper offense. I need to impose my game plan on the opponent and make them react. That's how this team works. Get back to my sort of core modes. Take my time. Impose my game plan. Just 4 more rounds to win. Just 3 more rounds to win. I was updating the number every time. But between rounds, I was telling myself over and over, take your time. Impose your game plan. At this point, 2 more rounds to win. And if I simply do that, I make day 2. So anyway, I lost round 8 to a Terrapagos team. Specs Terrapagos, and then a whole bunch of maddening stuff around it. You got the Gothitelle, which I'm seeing now had Hypnosis. I don't think I remembered that. Taunt, Fake Out. Got the Whimsicott with Encore. Bit of a problem, we know. He didn't bring the Mousehold, but then he had the Terrapagos, Chiyu, Fluttermane stuff. Pretty strong, overwhelming offense there. If I didn't already know that, I certainly learned. I said before that I didn't recognize my opponents as any big names in the game. I did vaguely recognize this guy's name, but I realized later that it was because I'd played him once before in Toronto. But anyway, he brought... Well, I wrote that I only saw Terrapagos, Fluttermane, Chiyu, and Whimsicott. I'm not sure that I know every Pokemon he brought to a game. He might not have sent everything in every game. But I didn't see him bring the Gothitelle or the Mousehold. And then from here, like I said, by this point of the day I was getting tired. Usually I get tired around round 6 at a tournament, but I got a coffee. One advantage of playing hyper offense at a tournament is that you can finish your sets pretty quickly a lot of the time. And you can get some downtime to go get a snack or something. I got a coffee after round 6, and I felt fine through round 7, but then it still started to set in at round 8. My notes are mostly just like, Specs Terrapagos is too strong. Specs Terrapagos is so scary. I have some notes on the speed control game as well. In game 1, his Whimsicott used Encore to lock my Whimsicott into Tailwind. Of course, I didn't have Encore on mine. I had Cotton Spore. But yeah, he locked me into Tailwind, and that kind of made for a dead slot for much of the game. And so then in game 2, I tried to adjust by bringing my Whimsicott in the back and getting my Tailwind up later in hopefully a more advantageous position. But what that really meant was that I lost all speed control, and my opponent's Tailwind offense could run over my team because Specs Terrapagos is just too strong. And I also have in game 2 that I was able to Terra my Zacian. You can see it's another Terra Ground Terra Blast Chiyu. So like I said, I feel like that must be a meta development that I missed before the tournament. But my Zacian terrestrialized and took down his Chiyu in game 2. But I must have taken damage on it in the process, because my notes say that nothing could handle Terrapagos. That's pretty much the gist of my notes for this round. I'm just like, Terrapagos is so strong, nothing can beat it. I feel like I tried to get off some big attacks into the Terrapagos, and it just tanked them too well. Like, Terrapagos is just too good, is what it comes down to. And so I dropped to 5-3, and I was out of contention to win the tournament. And I was still feeling good. I was kind of playing with house money, I felt like. Because, yeah, I'd started to hype myself up about day 2, and I got disabused of that notion very quickly. But my goal was already baked in. I'd already gone positive at an IC, which I'd never done before and had wanted to do. With a team that I picked up like 2 weeks before the tournament, after a long stretch of feeling like I couldn't find anything I liked in this format. I hadn't gone in expecting to go positive, I just wanted to. And like I said, it was house money at this point. But I was like, I'll just go to the last round, try to finish strong. There's no loftier goal here. Just try to get 6-3, finish strong. And my last opponent had this Zamazenta team. He saw my team and he was like, "Oh no, not Zacian." So it didn't seem like he felt very good about the matchup. But you can see the screens: Thunderwave Grimmsnarl, the Pelipper, the Rocky Helmet, Assault Vest Rillaboom, and then another Chandelure with Trick Room, Terragrass. And I was tired at this point. Plus, like I said, I didn't have that much left to play for at this point in the day. I will say, if I had won this set, I would have gotten championship points at NAIC, which would have been very cool. Instead, I finished just a little bit outside the range for championship points. And even that was a surprise to me, because I didn't feel like my resistance was likely to be very good. It was better than I thought, actually. I could easily have been further from championship point range, but I was just a little bit outside. And I would have gotten points if I had won round 9, but I wasn't trying to compete for Worlds. It would have been cool to get points, but I wasn't going to use them anyway. I have like 40 points right now. I wasn't qualifying for Worlds either way, and I wouldn't have time to go this year even if I did. That could be a lofty goal for another time. But I still wanted to play well, but like I said, I was getting tired. I joked to people around the time that I was literally forgetting how to play the game. Like, I don't mean making bad decisions in battle. I mean, literally, I was having trouble remembering the steps to connect with my opponent by round 9. And so I tried to sort of simplify my game plans, play more intuitively, because I just didn't feel up to processing as much information as I'd done earlier in the game. But it didn't work out for me. He brought his Trick Room mode with Chandelure game 1. I think I gave it a Flash Fire boost with my Chi-Yu when he switched it in. And he got the Trick Room up. Of course, Chi-Yu locked into a Fire attack. It's just a slot that can't threaten the Chandelure on the Trick Room turn. At that point, there's not much I can do there. And he, like I said, my notes get bad in the late rounds as I get tired. It just says that he beat me with Trick Room in game 1. That's all I have on that game. And then he didn't bring Trick Room for the rest of the set. In game 2, I led Zacian Chi-Yu, and I terastallized Zacian. And that meant both my Pokemon were able to avoid the Thunder Wave from the Grimmsnarl, which he did try to get me with. And I could just power through his team. Again, that's all I've written down for that game. The Zacian Chi-Yu lead, I guess, was strong. It felt like a pretty decisive win in game 2. And then in game 3, we both brought the same leads, I think. So it was my Zacian and Chi-Yu against his Grimmsnarl, and I don't remember what. Maybe Zamazenta. Oh, no. Okay, he led Moltres in games 2 and 3. I remember now. In game 2, I went Heat Wave, Behemoth Blade into Moltres, and it narrowly survived. But he went for the Thunder Wave play, and both of my Pokemon were immune to Prankster Thunder Wave, so I was still able to power through. Game 3, I wanted to deny his Tailwind in the same lead situation. So I tried to just delete Moltres with Overheat and Behemoth Blade instead of Heat Wave and Behemoth Blade, but I missed the Overheat. And then all I have after that is that there was some more hacks in the game. I missed 2 Overheats in this game. I don't know how much difference that made to the outcome. He missed a Thunder Wave into my Ogerpon, and Ogerpon was able to put in a bunch of work that it wouldn't have if it had been slowed by the para. So some luck on both sides. I don't have a record of how much it mattered, but I don't know. Somehow I lost game 3, and so I finished 5-4 at NAIC, which is my best finish yet at a major tournament. First time going positive. I'm pretty happy about it. And like I said, I finished in obviously there are a ton of tiebreakers at 5-4, but in the official standings, I'm in the top 300. I'm close to championship point range, just not quite there. My opponent got points. Good for him. And actually, if you've seen my PDL Draft League uploads, someone from that league was also at NAIC using a different Regidrago team with Terapagos that I think he'd adapted from an EUIC or maybe Stockholm team, but worked on a bunch himself. I don't think he's somebody who's appeared on the channel. He wasn't in the league in the most recent season. Can't think of a time I've played him. But he went 6-3 with his own Regidrago team, and lost to a top European player in his win-in round 9, and got championship points, of course, because everyone at 6-3 did. So it was a pretty good showing for the PDL, and a pretty good showing for Regidrago, as we used 2 fairly different Regidrago teams, and both got what I'd say were good results. But that was the end of my tournament, and it was only Friday. I had some more time in New Orleans. I had a ton of shrimp to eat. I can't remember. My mind is blown, is what I'm trying to say, by the sheer number of shrimp that I ate in like 4 nights in New Orleans. I love seafood, so that was a plus for sure. On Saturday, I entered my only side event of the weekend. It's called Chaos Cup. If you're unfamiliar, the organizers have a bunch of rental codes, teams they put together, usually fitting some kind of theme, and each round they give you a random team to use. So I love that kind of thing. Just pick up a random team and try to figure it out on the fly. That's great. And I knew Friday night that I wanted to play the early morning Saturday Chaos Cup, but I didn't commit until I was sure that I'd get up on time, which is to say, Saturday morning I walked into the convention center, and as I was walking to the hall, I was filling in the Arcanine registration for Chaos Cup on my phone like 15 or 20 minutes before it started. So 5 or 10 minutes before registration closed, I was registering on my phone walking through the convention center. And it's a little silly to do a recap of a quick 3-round side event, but I felt like I'd do it anyway. The teams were all based on characters teams from the Pokemon games. So in round 1, I got a Cynthia team, and my opponent had a Lance team. I didn't keep the rental for this team, so I have tried to reconstruct it from memory. I think it's pretty accurate, but I didn't remember a lot of Braviary's set. I think the rest of these are fine. Maybe the Focus Sash was on the Braviary, but then I can't think of what Lucario's item was. But this is about right. My opponent had a Lance team with like Dragonite, Gyarados, Charizard, Haxorus, Hydreigon, Salamence. I think it was those 6. And we played... Our set was probably the last one to finish in Chaos Cup round 1. Partly because we had trouble connecting. I had fine connection luck in the main event, but round 1 of the side event, not so much. And then my opponent won a close game 1, so I lost game 1, and I was like, her team is just so powerful. She has so many strong Pokemon. What do I do? And what I did was spend the next 2 games cheesing her over and over with Spiritomb's Will-O-Wisp, Gastrodon's Yawn, and I even got an Ice Beam Freeze at one point. And my opponent seemed frustrated afterward, which feels kind of bad because it's a silly little side event. People should be having fun. But I used the tools that the organizers gave me, and Cynthia gave me, and I won games 2 and 3. In round 2 of Chaos Cup, I had this Professor Oak team. Actually, they had sheets at every table for Chaos Cup that would have the rental code for the team that you were using that round, and just a list of the 6 Pokemon, no other information on the printed sheet. And people kept stopping when I had this team, and I'm going, whose team is that? A judge even asked me at one point, whose team is this? And I would say, well, apparently it's Professor Oak. And they would go, oh, yeah, okay. I do still have the rental for this one, so I was able to check that it's accurate. But this was probably the shortest set of round 2. At least I didn't notice one that ended earlier. Because my opponent had what I assume was a Diantha team with all of the fairy weaknesses that implies. She had Goodra, Hawlucha, Noivern. Game 1, Sylveon just ran through her team, and Game 2, Sylveon just ran through her team a little more slowly. she brought what fairy resist she had, but it wasn't enough. And I had the fake out support from Raichu, and Intimidate and Speed Control. Afterward, I was like, I said to her, this is a really tough matchup for you. I don't know why they set it up this way, but I know the answer. In hindsight, I know the answer. They set it up at random. They just distributed the rental codes at random. And I happened to get the Sylveon against a bunch of fairy weaknesses. And then in round 3, I actually played against the Cynthia team that I'd used in round 1. I was worried that I'd get a bunch of Will-O-Wisps and Yawns used against me. But I had this team, which I don't know what its deal is. It was called Sierra. And I don't know whether that's a character in a side game or something. They were pulling from side games for some teams. But I don't know if it's that, or they decided that Sierra Dawn counts as a Pokemon character, and this is her team. But, yeah, I was against the Cynthia team. Game 1, I led Sableye Staraptor. Sableye set screens. Staraptor would just take a KO and then switch out and come in later and take another KO. And then I had a Bombasnow in the back with Terra Water. Cynthia's team was pretty vulnerable to Blizzard, and the Lucario couldn't take it down easily after I Terastallized, and then I had the Scizor which could chip things with Bullet Punch even if they resisted, like the Lucario. Pretty easy Game 1 win. Game 2, I threw out that entire game plan and led Abomasnow Slowking with Farigiraf and Scizor in the back. Tried to go for Trick Room, completely backfired. They just KO'd all my Trick Room setters before I could set it. And Water Scizor made a last stand that didn't work out. So in Game 3, I just went back to the first game plan and won again. So 3-0 in Chaos Cup. Got a bunch of prize tickets, exchanged some of them for one of those big Terrestrial Form Terrapagos plushes. Fun time all around. We had to use restricted rules for Chaos Cup because there was one team that had a Mewtwo on it. I think it was the Giovanni team. And I really wanted to get that team because I sat near it a couple times and people were always like, whoa, this team is a Mewtwo, but it's still so bad. It sounded like everyone who got the Mewtwo team was struggling. I really wished I could take a crack at it, but I didn't have that luck. And then that was the last Pokemon I played that weekend, Saturday morning. I took some time Saturday afternoon to explore the city. Got some beignet, walked around the French Quarter. It was Pride, so there was a naked bike ride that I crossed paths with a couple times. So that was the thing that happened. But also it was very hot, so I just walked around for like a couple hours and then went back to my aggressively air-conditioned hotel room for a bit. And went and got some seafood at night. Sunday morning, I didn't really know what to do. I went to the venue, kind of just hung around doing nothing for a while. Thought about entering a side event, didn't do it. I'd gone to the Pokemon Center right after I finished rounds on Friday. In fact, I had a booking at 6 o'clock, and when I saw that the tournament was going to run longer than that, I moved it to 8, and I finished round 9 just a few minutes before 8 and just went right over to the Pokemon Center pop-up. I thought about going back on Sunday, but I'd already bought a bunch of stuff, and I wasn't sure that I would buy anything on a second trip. And it's set up in a way that I would have felt weird about not buying anything. They give you a shopping bag when you go in, and there's a big checkout area to go through to leave. So I felt like I would feel weird not buying anything, and the reason that I might not buy anything was that I bought a bunch of stuff already, so I might as well just not go in. So I didn't do that Sunday morning. What I did do was, of course, I'm a Wolf Glick subscriber. I went to his little subscriber meetup. I met Wolf Glick. I also was at his subscriber group photo last year, but I didn't really feel like I'd met him because I just kind of hung out around at the back of the group and didn't speak to him at all. That sounds more awkward than it was. He didn't speak to most people there, I think, that time. It was just kind of get group photo and go. He was busy. He's an influencer, right? But this time, unambiguously, I met Wolf Glick, and he signed my team sheet. And I also got a pack of trading cards from Mr. Pikachu himself, Chris Brown, when he wandered over and started giving out packs. So that was cool. And then I watched the finals. I caught most of the TCG Masters final, but I haven't played the TCG since I was a kid. And even then, I played super casually. So I had absolutely no idea what was going on. But congrats to Andrew Hedrick on winning the Masters division somehow. And then I watched the video game finals. Junior was fun, Senior was fun, but the main event absolutely was the Masters division. Obviously, you can find that on YouTube, but I mean, Patrick and Aurélien just traded blows all through that set, and the crowd was super into it, no matter who was winning. And then, of course, in Game 3, Patrick just with the masterful game plan, but both his Pokemon paralyzed. The crowd was audibly tensing up whenever Patrick's Pokemon went for a move, but his Pokemon loved him, and they broke through. And there was a loud USA chant near me late in Game 3 when it was clear that Patrick was going to win. And of course, it wasn't only Patrick's Pokemon that loved him. If you've seen the stream, you know that his family drove from Florida to survive him. I've been talking for an hour. Cut me some slack. To surprise him. And he only found out right after the set that they were there, and it was a super touching moment. It was, I mean, I was feeling some stuff for sure, watching this player that I hadn't heard of before get his first big win with his family there, without him even knowing they were there until the end. I'm feeling some emotions right now as I say it. It was just an incredible way to cap off the tournament. And then I went back to my hotel and got some more food and had a long day of flying back home the next day, and here we are. That's the NAIC recap. I realize I'm probably going to title this How I Solved My Ghost Horse matchup, and I never talked about Shadow Rider Calyrex. Well, the reason is I solved my Ghost Horse matchup very easily. Even I went in worried about Shadow Rider Calyrex, but it was very straightforward. I just didn't ever play one in the entire tournament. So how's that for solving a matchup? If you look through the Pokemon that I faced, the restricted Pokemon, it's actually a very reasonable restricted split. I faced 2 Ice Rider, 2 Zamazenta, 2 Miraidon, 1 Terrapagos, and a couple of off-meta Pokemon in Zekrom and Eternatus. So nothing out of the ordinary there, except that there's just no Shadow Rider. I also didn't face a Kyogre, so hey, maybe that helped me to go positive, not getting the matchups I was most worried about. But yeah, fun tournament, fun situations surrounding the tournament, incredible final to watch in person. New Orleans is an interesting city for sure. It's definitely unlike anywhere I've ever been before. I can see why some people love it, and I can kind of see why some people hate it. I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't know that it's my favorite place that I've been for a tournament, but I found it interesting to explore for sure, and they've announced that NAIC will be there again next year. I'll probably go. I do consider it not an ideal place to go back to because it's far from where I live. Columbus was a bit more convenient to get to, made for some shorter flying days, but we'll make do. And then New Orleans is also just super humid, super hot. I'm not really built for that, but it's fine for a weekend at a convention center. I did feel very good when I got home and stepped out of the airport in like crisp, cool air where I would have been comfortable with a sweater if I had one. But all around I had a good time in New Orleans and at the tournament, and I definitely want to go next year. And maybe even do better than 5-4. I don't know what my next goal is for a tournament. I don't know if it's get championship points. I don't know if it's make day 2, or even like now that I have shown that I can go positive. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I try to be the best Zekrom player next time, or something equivalent to that. I don't know what my next event will be. Obviously, they haven't announced any for next season yet, so I'll figure out the goal when I have to. But it feels good to be at this step of the journey for sure, and I don't know. Keep practicing, playing around with different teams, and we'll see what comes next. Probably do some more NAIC related content, but for now, see you next time.